Welcome to the First Year Business Podcast, and I feel that this episode is long overdue because it's been a long time since I've had the opportunity to talk to you guys, and this is not the episode that you guys were probably thinking was going to come up, but I have so much to share with you. I actually look forward to doing this episode so that I can kind of update you guys on what's going on, what's new, what's coming up in 2024, and all the things. So, of course, my name is Lashawnda Smith, and I am your host. And disclaimer, I was supposed to record this video a couple of days ago, and now I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot because now I have a cold, and so I sound like a man. But I was really, really eager to record this episode today. So I'm like, y'all just gonna have to get me how I am. So my voice may sound a little bit different, but hey, the show must go on. We're gonna keep it moving. So if you've seen the title of this episode, you know that it has something to do with me ending this podcast. Well, kinda ending the podcast. And I want to talk about what's going on. So as you guys know, I have not posted an episode since July. The last episode that I posted was actually with Lashawnda West. We were talking about how to overcome imposter syndrome. And then after that, I just kind of fell flat out of podcasting. And let me tell you why. So right around the time when I did that podcast episode, I had already made the decision that I was going to go all in on YouTube. I was like, I love my podcast. I love having my podcast, but I absolutely need to focus on one platform. And if I'm going to focus on what platform, which one am I choosing? And so based on the things that I kind of reviewed and what my long-term vision was, I said, you know what? I need to go all in on my YouTube channel, because I feel that the more I grow my YouTube channel, the more I'm going to be able to grow my brand, the more I'm going to be able to get more opportunities, grow my business and my podcast. And as easy as it is to podcast, I knew realistically that I was biting off way too much with my business, and something had to go, at least temporarily. So after I did that episode, also around July, I also got a full-time job, and that was another reason why I made the decision to go all in on one platform, because I wasn't going to be able to really have the time to do all the things in my business like what I was doing before. And so I was like, okay, let me just pursue YouTube and then, see what happens. And I'm so thankful that I have done that, because when I first made that decision to start YouTube, I want to say I already had the channel, but I was not being consistent. I was posting maybe once a month, maybe once every other week or something. Like, it just was not consistent. And I had around maybe like 200 subscribers, 200 and some change. And then the moment I started really going all in on YouTube, I went from having 200 subscribers to getting 1,000 subscribers. And now at the date of this recording, I'm at around 1548 or something like that. I've been gaining on average around 300 to 500 new subscribers, depending on the month, depending on how frequent I'm posting. And so it's been going really, really good for me. But I've always had in the back of my mind, what am I going to do with my podcast? When am I going to pop back on my podcast? And if you're watching the video format, you probably have questions like, girl, look at your background. You got a new podcast mic. Like, this setup looks completely different from the last setup that you had. So you look like you're still podcasting, but you just ain't podcasting for us. So I want to talk about that. So during this time when I got my job, that didn't last for like 3 months. And if you're not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, I highly suggest you go over there, because I've been consistent over there and I actually have videos on what's been going on throughout the months. So I'll drop the link to my YouTube channel in the show notes so that you can check that out. If you're watching this over on YouTube, then I'll make sure to link my podcast over here, or my podcast. I'll make sure to link my YouTube channel over here so that way you can check that out. But I have a video on me quitting my job. But during that process, me and Michael, my fiance, was like, you know what? We need to go all in on content creation. And the way for us to do that, we really need to have a better recording space, because now he's recording episodes. He's recording podcast episodes for his brand. He's doing YouTube videos and TikToks and things like that. And we both just needed our own designated space to record the amount of content that we've been wanting to record. And so we were like, What if we turned our living room into a content studio? I mean, we only have my mom come to visit us. No one really comes here. We don't really use the living room like that. I mean, we have our TV and all the other stuff, but we're in a season of who has time to watch TV? Like, we need to be hitting the ground running. We need to be pushing our needle forward in our businesses and our brands. Like, the living room area is not a priority in this season of our life. So, we ended up changing our living room into a studio. And so what you're seeing on the video podcast is actually our YouTube studio. This is my version, and then his version is to the left of me. And we got new mics, as you can see, and I absolutely love this mic. We started our own couples podcast over on Shonda and Michael's channel. So there's been a lot of things going on that I have not had the opportunity to update you guys on. So why is this important to you? The reason why I'm ending this podcast, because that's what this episode is about. The reason why I'm ending this podcast is because now in this new season of my business journey, I have finally figured out what my thing is. And everyone has a zone of genius. Everyone has that thing that they're just passionate about. And for years, I've been really struggling to figure out what that thing is for me. What comes easy for me? What is the thing that it wouldn't feel like work, something that I would just love to do and just give my all into. And I started realizing that I love talking about YouTube. I love helping people with YouTube. I feel that it is very important for any personal brand to have a YouTube channel or a podcast or both. And finally, I was just like, why? I'm building my YouTube channel. I'm motivating people to start and commit to their YouTube channels again. And so I stepped into the YouTube space. I'm like, I want to dominate the YouTube industry, and I want to help women entrepreneurs with starting their YouTube channel and helping them get their first 1,000 YouTube subscribers. And so now that I am pursuing that, as well as helping people with their podcast, but I don't want to get too deep into everything because this podcast will be super, super long. I think with the podcasting side, I want to help people focus on video podcasting and putting it over on YouTube because that is a gem in itself. But I still, in the back of my head, was like, girl, what you gonna do with your podcast? Like, you still want a podcast, but your current podcast no longer really aligns with the season that you're stepping into, because the name of this podcast is the First Year Business Podcast, targeting entrepreneurs who are in their first year of business and giving them new business tips. And if I'm being honest, the season that I am stepping into, it does not make sense for me to continue talking to new business owners. Like, the content that I'm going to be producing moving forward is not going to be for the new entrepreneur. Now, don't get me wrong, some new entrepreneurs will benefit from the direction that I'm moving into, but I no longer desire for that to be the focus, but I do still want a podcast. So sharing all this to say that I am ending the First Year Business Podcast. It was really, really hard for me to make the decision because I really, really love my podcast. I mean, so much so to where I got a podcast mic. I want to make sure I was intentional about what my setup looked like when I came back to the podcast. But the topic and the nature of the podcast that I currently have no longer aligns with the direction that I'm moving into. So what's next? Because I said, well, kind of ending the podcast. So what does that mean, right? I still want a podcast, and I'm still planning to have a podcast. But what's going to happen is, on this podcast specifically, I'm doing a complete rebrand. So if you here and you want to stay with me, then you don't have to do anything different. You're going to see the rebrand once it's available. But this podcast, the name of this podcast is going to completely change. I have not made a final decision on what the name of the podcast is going to be yet, but the name of the podcast is going to change. The branding of the podcast is going to completely change. I do know what the podcast is going to be catering towards, or at least I have an idea. So don't quote me on it in case you come back and it's something different, because it's still in the brainstorming phase. But what I'm thinking that I want to do is I want to turn this podcast into a space for different entrepreneurs to be able to come. So it's going to kind of change it to an interview style podcast. Now, I am still going to do some solo podcasting as well on this podcast, but for the most part, I want to start doing interviews with people who what's the word I'm looking for? Who pursue long form content, because there's so much power in creating long form content. Like, this is an example of long form content. YouTube videos is long form content. Whether you do blogging, speaking engagements, you host events or anything like that, I want to start interviewing people and letting them share their experience, letting them share tips on how it has helped them grow their business. I think that that's going to be a lot more beneficial based on the direction of my business that I'm moving it into. So I'm really, really excited about that. I just have, the moment I'm able to come up with a name, I will be able to kind of start doing the rebrand. But the name part is the hardest part for me. It takes me a long time to come up with a name. And I'm the type of person where if it doesn't sound right, like if it doesn't sit well in my spirit, I can't move forward with it. But the moment I say the right name, I'm like, yes, that's the one. So I'm waiting for that moment. But it is going to come back. The podcast is going to come back. I don't have an exact date as to when it's going to relaunch, but just to kind of give you like a heads up or like an estimated date, I'm thinking that I'm going to relaunch this podcast during second quarter of this year. So that is already January, about to go into February, and I'm launching a new YouTube Launch Academy right now. I have a lot of different things going on for first quarter. So it doesn't really make sense for me to relaunch it now because I feel that I will be biting off too much, and I don't want to relaunch it if I can't be consistent. But after quarter one, the goal is for me to be able to make this my thing for quarter two with a relaunch. And that way I know I will be able to be more consistent. I'll already have some interviews lined up and, just kind of go from there. So that's the gist of it. I feel like I'm talking a whole lot, but I really hope you guys understand that this is not goodbye. This is just a pause for now. And I feel that a lot of people in my audience anyway are already kind of seasoned in their business. So you probably won't see a big difference if you're already, a business owner for at least a year or so. Like if you already have business experience, then I don't think you will really see a major difference, but the content is going to look a lot different when it comes to what we're going to actually be talking about, but it's still going to be along the lines of business. It's going to be more so content focused. So we're going to be talking a lot more about creating content because we are in the era of creating content. And a lot of business owners struggle with creating content. So I think that it makes sense for where we are as a society in entrepreneurship right now, and I look forward to it. So I'm going to end the podcast here. If you want to comment on this, I do have it on YouTube as well, and they have like a new YouTube music app where you can actually leave comments on here. So if wherever you're listening to this, definitely leave me a comment, give me some feedback. Give me like some supportive feedback, guys. Don't be mad at me. But thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you soon. Bye.